And then one other very dramatic thing that our local troops are doing, and believe it or not, at the request of the White House. This is what's so interesting about living and working in Washington, D.C. The mayor called upon the Army National Guard to do several things, and the White House also called out the D.C. Air National Guard. Earlier today, an F-16 fighter aircraft from the 113th Wing of the D.C. Air National Guard was actually called upon to intercept a second aircraft that was perceived to be yet another threat to the Pentagon. They aren't giving any details as to exactly how they deterred that plane. Perhaps they'll be able to share that with us as the days go by and it's not such a sensitive situation. But in any case, it is possible that there was a second aircraft that was headed toward the Pentagon, and because of the D.C. Air National Guard, that situation was taken care of. And then one other very dramatic thing that our local troops are doing, and believe it or not, at the request of the White House. This is what's so interesting about living and working in Washington, D.C. The mayor called upon the Army National Guard to do several things, and the White House also called out the D.C. Air National Guard. Earlier today, an F-16 fighter aircraft from the 113th Wing of the D.C. Air National Guard was actually called upon to intercept a second aircraft that was perceived to be yet another threat to the Pentagon. They aren't giving any details as to exactly how they deterred that plane. Perhaps they'll be able to share that with us as the days go by and it's not such a sensitive situation. But in any case, it is possible that there was a second aircraft that was headed toward the Pentagon, and because of the D.C. Air National Guard, that situation was taken care of.
Higher in the skies, the D.C. Air National Guard flew F-16s for air defense. One of those F-16s was requested by the White House and helped deter a second suspicious plane that appeared to be headed for the Pentagon.
There was a second airplane that was approaching the Pentagon, and they went up to discourage anything happening there.
Higher in the skies, the D.C. Air National Guard flew F-16s for air defense. One of those F-16s was requested by the White House and helped deter a second suspicious plane that appeared to be headed for the Pentagon.
There was a second airplane that was approaching the Pentagon, and they went up to discourage anything happening there.
Yeah, we want to take our viewers live to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our Brian Cabell is standing by. This, of course, is the site where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed on its way from Newark to San Francisco, crashed on Tuesday. And I understand in this investigation there's some breaking news. Brian, what can you tell us?
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site, which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away, so it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course, but there were some cell phone callers, one cell phone caller in particular, who said he saw a bomb or something that looked like a bomb with one of the hijackers. Also, the man who took over the plane apparently announced that at one point there was a bomb on board the plane. So again, we don't want to speculate, we don't want to jump to conclusions, but what we do know is that there is a site about a half mile behind me where the plane went down, where most of the debris is, and then about 6 miles away up by a lake, there is another area that's been cordoned off, and state police and the FBI have said definitely there is debris from the plane located there. We have a crew on the way right now. We should have pictures of that a little bit later on. In the meantime, the search here goes on. 80 searchers going foot by foot, combing the area, looking for evidence. They have not yet found the black box. Darren?
which was my first question, so I'll move on to my next one, Brian. We don't want to speculate about this large debris field, but it seems to me from covering a number of plane crashes on the scene that, if nothing else, you can say this is not typical for a plane crash to be spread across an area this large.
It certainly doesn't make sense because most of the debris has been found in a very compact area, within 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe a little beyond that. And then all of a sudden they're telling us 6 miles away they have another concentration of debris. They say it's very small pieces. Most of these are very small pieces. Most of the pieces here are no bigger than the size of a briefcase, they say, and the pieces 6 miles away maybe even smaller than that. They've talked to a number of individuals here. They say they have talked to people who saw this plane during the final moments. They haven't confirmed whether they talked to anybody who saw this plane actually land, or crash rather. And as to whether it broke up on the way, we don't know that. FBI is being very tight-lipped about that. But again, it leads to that possibility. It certainly leads to a number of questions.
You mentioned they have yet to find the black box. It would seem to me, when you compare the 4 plane crashes of Tuesday, this would be the site where they would be most likely to find a black box.
That's what they told us initially, and I think they're somewhat disappointed they haven't found it. It's been 48 hours, but they are still hopeful they will find it. There is a pond nearby this particular site. They may have to send divers into the pond. They haven't done that yet, but conceivably it could be in the pond. It could be anywhere. It could be at this other debris site. They've also found some other debris scattered around this area. They say, in fact, some individuals have been collecting it. Again, we're talking about very, very tiny parts. The biggest part they found at this site is an engine part, and most of the other pieces are probably no bigger than this particular notebook. So again, very small pieces. They had hoped to find the black box by now. They're still voicing optimism they will find it.
It's not an assignment I would wish on anybody, but I would say that you would have to have an assignment like that to appreciate what that looks like when a plane comes crashing into the ground and basically just drops out of the sky. Brian Cabell in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, thank you very much. Also a note from yesterday when we were listening into an FBI news conference, they were saying they expect this search just at this site to take about 3 to 5 weeks. So they are going to be very deliberate and look for every possible piece of evidence. Brian, thank you very much.
I'm standing there watching on TV, and the lights flickered in the building. About that time we heard the engines roar, and we took off out of the building. As we were coming out from the office out through the building, the ground shook and we heard big boom. Looked over and saw the big ball of fire up in the air. Like I said, probably within 45 seconds or a minute of impact, we were there. We were there before any firemen, any paramedics, or anybody. We were on site. When we got there, there was a plane flying up above, and he was smart. He flew straight for the sun, so you couldn't look at it and see exactly what type of plane or if it was a fighter or what it was. But we caught a glimpse of it, and as he was swinging, he was basically traveling in the same direction as the plane. It was in Atlanta, and that was this past winter. I was in Yamaha training. And I was sitting there talking. Everybody, of course, asked where you're from, introduce yourself to everybody in the classroom. And of course, now we just say Shanksville, where a plane crashed, and everybody knows where we're at. So I was sitting there talking to another guy, and I was telling about, he said, did you see the plane crash and whatever, was you there or anything? And I told him the whole story. And I was explaining to him about whenever we were standing in the office and the lights flickered and everything. And there was another gentleman sitting in the row in front of me that was retired from the Air Force. And as soon as he heard me say that, he immediately stopped me and he said, tell me this. And I told him, and he says, well, I'm retired from the Air Force. He said, that plane was shot down. And I said, why? And he said, because whenever the lights flickered, they zapped the radar frequency on everything before they shoot. And he said, that's why your lights flickered. Your lights didn't flicker from the impact. Your lights flicker because they zapped the radar system before they shot it.
Have a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face if the people who bombed the Best Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania.